everybody. My name is John.
My name is
I'm
Sandra.
Jennifer.
Okay.
I'm Abby.
I'm still Jennifer. And for this week, we watched The Big Sick. It was directed by Michael Showalter, and it is a 2017 rom-com about this Uber driver named Kumail and his story through finding love and how it happened.
hmm
And we're going to talk about what is it? The narrative
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 structure.
structure.
The
narrative structure.
three
That was the word I was
act
looking for.
narrative structure.
Yes.
Thank you, Abby.
No
Because
worries.
when he told us about this assignment, I thought it was going to be relatively easy. And not to sit here and be like it was hard, but it took a lot more thinking than I thought was originally required. I will
hmm
be the first to admit.
And I will be the second.
Mhm.
Perfect.
All right. So, should we start with talking about how we narrowed down the specific times of the movie in conjunction to the percentages that we were given in class?
Yeah, I can cover most of that for like most of the acts. So the three act narrative structure works in the 25, 60 to 15. So when you calculate that, the whole runtime is 2 hours or like 3 minutes less. But the first act is the first 30 minutes. So that ends at the scene where they're at the wine tasting and they're talking about how they're overwhelmed by each other. I'm just gonna go through all the things and then
Mhm.
we can talk about them if that works.
Okay.
The second act is the minutes 30 to 140, which is 72 minutes long, and it ends with the conversation at her anniversary party where all the nurses are, everything that took care of her when the two characters have the conversation. And then the third act is just the last 18 minutes.
Cute. Do we want to
Perfect.
start with what our inciting incident is or what we think it is?
Okay.
Because
Sure.
that's something you can't really like quantify, I guess.
Yeah.
Or at least it's not quantified within three act structure. So I personally thought it was in like almost the very beginning when Emily is like heckling Kumail during his comedy set. And I think it's pretty obvious as to why, just because like that's the first time that they really like that they come into contact with each other. We're getting a whiff of what could be, you know?
Oh, with what could be.
hmm
That's really good. And I
Yeah.
think also, even though the nature of the conflict in this movie is multifaceted, and you can argue what the role different like threads of narrative play into the central conflict, I think it is undeniable that like the inciting incident is him meeting Emily because it launches in like all every single plot thread kind of like is launched from this one encounter, this relationship with Emily, and even the ones where she's like less involved, like his relationship with his parents are still like absolutely affected by Emily and the love that they share, or
Hmm.
and I don't know. There's a lot of ways that the story varies from this point on, but I do agree that it is like pretty unassailable that it was an inciting incident.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I agree as well. I feel like when I watched it immediately, I was like waiting for it. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm writing that down because it's just very much in your face. Oh, this is the introduction
hmm
or the start of everything. Everything before was kind of like little things here and there, like little problems. But then it was like, okay, we're starting something.
hmm
hmm Yeah, I very much agree. Like, I don't know. I don't really have much to add other than like, yeah, that's like what the whole like starts the whole movie off basically.
Hmm.
Like everything revolves around
Can
their
I
relationship.
can I play devil's advocate for 30 seconds?
Please do.
Um, so like, is the inciting incident when she heckles him for the first time and that prompts them like meeting and talking? Or is the inciting incident when they go back to his room? Because if we go back to when we talked about what the inciting incident was, it's not the issue itself, but it will become an issue. Her
hmm
her heckling him isn't like that's I would argue more that that's just like a thing that happened, but rather when she introduces herself into his life, now we're getting a sense of what this how this could be an issue. Because it's not an issue when she introduces herself either, but it's not like because that comes later on when it goes into the whole like you didn't tell your parents about me thing. Like that whole conflict is prompted because they start a connection, not because she heckles him.
hmm No, I
I
think you're out. Go,
That's my
Abby.
2 cents.
No, I was just saying I don't think it's when it heckles, but I also don't think when it goes back. I think it's literally the short time when I was thinking of it was when they were at the bar talking. Like that's
Okay,
the frame in which I was like, oh, this is where it starts. But
I
Mm.
like
I
that.
I don't really have exact reasoning for it other than I didn't feel it was like the heckling. And then I felt like that was like, okay, the starting point.
Mhm.
It's like
It's
mid of the two offers.
mhm.
Hmm.
I think it's difficult to trace something as like I don't know, because like the inciting incident is like the initial encounter or like when like the forces that like generate the conflict come into contact. And but it's difficult in this situation because there's so much about like how he meets Emily that's like ingrained in like his routine and how he forms relationships with people that it doesn't really become an encounter or it doesn't become like something like I don't know if significance is the right word, but something unique until maybe like a little bit into the encounter because we
Mhm.
see like this motif of him like talking to girls at bars that like he meets at his performance and like he uses the same lines that he uses with Emily with another girl after they break up and it's just like at what point does he like begin to see Emily or the two of them begin to like actually like see each other? Because it almost feels like they aren't they're kind of like running through lines. They're running through like some sort of like their own mechanisms of relationships and meeting people until a certain point where it becomes okay, we're actually meeting each other now. I don't know if that's maybe if I'm stretching the line too thin there or because it just doesn't feel natural until a certain point.
No, I see what you're saying, especially because like his whole stand up, like that's his like at least that first encounter when she's heckling him from the stage, like he is on stage right now, he's doing a job. Like this
hmm
is his work. And so that's there's kind of like a facade there that is still up when he does like the Urdu napkin thing. Because he
hmm
does we see him do that again later on.
Yep,
So where
exactly.
exactly the inciting incident takes place would be somewhere where maybe both walls are down, but are we going too far as that's not like inciting anymore because they know each other. It's an
hmm
interesting line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's more interesting things to talk about.
Do we want to
Yes,
talk about
absolutely.
plot point one?
Oh God. We
Oh
can
yeah.
yes, we can
Yeah.
talk about
Let's
plot point one.
So if we look at it for the times, I have the times written down, but if we look at it, plot point one would be when they're sitting at the wine tasting. It might not be a wine tasting, but they're both tasting the
yeah,
wine, and it
it's a
says
wine
hmm
tasting.
she's talking about how she was married before, and then she just says, I'm overwhelmed by you. And that's like he says that I'm overwhelmed by you. And
hmm
that's, if you look at the time, that's where plot point one is.
hmm
So that can be debated. Is that actually the
Yeah.
end of Act One, start of Act Two?
No, I think that's pretty good because plot point one is like the point of no return. Once like the like you can't put the hat back in the box. Like you've reached the point where um the conflict is generating itself and it's just gonna everything's gonna play out at this point. And I think that in that moment where they say like that they overwhelm each other, that's where the relationship becomes like becomes something that's like sticky and attached and it's going to start affecting other relationships. So even though maybe his conflict with Emily as a relationship is not like the central conflict of the movie and it's more about him and his own family, which is an argument that I think even if we may not all 100% agree on, we all kind of like see we all enjoy that line of reasoning. So
Yeah.
but even if that is like what we believe, still like the like this as plot point one his relationship with Emily it like will eventually reach into like the other plot threads and other lines and is like sort of like what generates that tension as well.
hmm I think you're completely right for the most like I don't want to sit here and be like, well, I think you're wrong. Because no, you're so correct. Because it depends on what you define the conflict as. Because what on like the surface level, if we were just looking at like watching this movie and being like, oh, this is about his relationship with other people, or like his relationship with Emily, that is 110% plot point one. That's when their relationship gets more serious, and that's when they like start to commit their time to each other, even if they weren't like we're doing that, but weren't acknowledging that before. This is like for the most part, a fully rounded relationship that they're like cultivating.
Yeah.
But if that's what you define, like if that's what you think the conflict is, then that's plot point one. But I think I'm gonna hold off on what I think plot point one is because it's a lot farther down the road than where we stopped this.
I'm so
Yeah,
excited. Yeah,
I'm also
John?
excited.
I was gonna say, I think we might be thinking of the same one, if
Yeah,
is what we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
we'll
Should
get
we?
there.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to give Abby a chance to like. Do you agree with where you think, or do you agree with the like technical where plot point one should be?
Yeah, I think I do in two ways. First of all, I noticed that the scene before it is the one where he's talking to his brother about Emily. And so I noticed that like in that zone, I feel like a lot happens for the conflict between his relationship between him and his family, but also between him and Emily. So like depending on which conflict you want, there are two scenes there that could revolve in that time frame. Like the time frame isn't that big though. But I also think this stands as like a good point between Act One and Act Two, in that everything before this was kind of like mundane and there was no extreme conflict. But I think after this point, the conflict starts to ramp up, whatever that little like thing
Yeah.
was.
Oh, the
We did in
The
exclamation
class.
mark?
zigzaggy.
The
Yeah.
zigzaggy. Like,
We're climbing towards.
yeah, I feel like after that point, or maybe like a little further on, it just starts to like, I think they have their first breakup and then it's like, boop, 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 boop.
Okay,
Mhm.
this is like an EKG chart. I don't know what you're doing.
Okay. It's going up, but it's
Yeah.
Going up, but it's
visual.
like.
Okay.
I
I think
visualize it.
I think that maybe we should, Abby, that's a great point that you make about how those two like scenes that are next to each other, with Kumail and his brother Naveed, and also with him and Emily, both kind of like are like a cornerstone, representative cornerstones of like the conflict that goes forward. Like his relationship with Emily is going to start impacting his relationship with his family, and they both kind of um, are concerned with that idea.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's important that we maybe kind of stay there for a couple seconds and try to distinguish between the two. Like, they're doing like similar narrative things, these two scenes, but are there differences? Because one of them is where like he's directly talking with his brother, and the other one is where he's like professing like this sort of like love between him and Emily. And I'm wondering, since plot point one is like the point of no return, are either of these like irreversible actions in a certain way? I feel
I
like both
think
are, but yeah, go ahead.
with the scene with the brother before and where the brother's like, hey, this is probably not going to end up well, I think the scene after is a point of no return in his brain because he is making an active choice to be like, but then they break up. So I every time I nail something on plot point one, I'm like, oh, I have this. Like continuously throughout watching it, I just was like, oh my God, plot point one. And then I'd scrape it out and be like, oh my God, this is definitely it. This is definitely it. And
Is it the
plot
same
point one
thing?
turned into plot point two. And then,
Yeah,
yeah.
No.
because you're right. They do like profess their love for each other in an irreversible way. And then yet again, it is like reversed in the next scene where, or not the next scene, but like soon after where they break up and part ways. Pretty like, I think like that's a pretty solid break. Like, and we can
Yeah.
talk about solid breaks versus non-solid breaks later on.
Were they on
But
a break or was it a break?
it was like the break. It was like the end.
Mhm.
Wait, John
So
and Jen, what do you think plot point two is?
Well,
Like if
not
you
to
have the
plot
same
point one.
consensus.
oh yeah,
Oh, one.
real. Not to poke holes in your story, but I think the true plot point one is many a scenes later. No, only because you're like it's not revert like plot point one is like like irreversible, no going back, and then you guys are like, well, then they break up. So they
Yeah,
do kind of
exactly.
they reverse it. I would argue, and I'm pretty sure John feels the same way, that plot point one really happens when because it's silly when you say it out loud. When Kumail tells his parents about Emily, and then he's effectively kicked out of the family.
And can you remind us when that in fact takes place in the movie?
Probably at least an hour and 20 minutes in. And I know the timing isn't there, but when you look at like what plot point one is supposed to be, and what I and I'm talking for John right in a second, but I'm assuming feel similarly, feel that what the conflict is in the movie, unless I'm wrong and like you can cut me off, that like it's more
I was thinking
about
of something completely different, but I'll come in
oh,
after
I'm
Great.
so
and talk about
sorry.
that. No, you're good. I
Okay.
was confused.
So
But
you
no,
don't feel
continue.
similar. That's okay.
No, I had the same thought. Don't worry. Like that.
Okay.
This I was like, oh, this could be plot point one, but like it was just really late in the film,
Oh
so that's
yeah,
what
I did it like
made me
four
think
times. I'm like
otherwise.
scribbling things out. No, that's so okay. When he tells his parents that he's like he was dating Emily and he's in love with Emily, and then the mom literally says, "You are not my son anymore." Like he is kicked out of this. Like that is an irreversible act, and we know it's irreversible because he tries to reverse it later on. Later on, it's like a scene later when he comes back with like the cue cards
Yeah, that's
and
good.
they
That's
don't
good.
talk to him. And then at the
Hmm.
end of the film, when the dad's like, "Your mom won't talk to you. She's sitting in the car." And I can't hug you. Like they're like they can't go back because
Uh,
I'm judging the conflict more as um it's Kumail's like not fight with, but it's his relationship with his culture and how that affects his life in America.
hmm
And it's how he's trying to balance that like centuries of cultural norms versus one I said the phrase centuries of cultural norms versus wanting what he perceives a normal American life.
Yeah. Wait,
No, I
John, what scene were you thinking of?
I was thinking about like when she goes to the hospital, like when he finds out, like they're like, "Yo, Camille, I would need you to go, like check on Emily," and he's like, "Oh shit, I gotta go do that," and then he's like, and like a couple scenes later he just keeps going back and he's like, you know what, I'm like committed, I'm gonna keep showing up like no matter what, even though like we're broken up, but like and her parents kind of don't want me there, but like he feels like he cares about her so much that he's gonna like commit to it, he's gonna keep showing up, and like that's when he like kind of, I don't know, decides himself that he is going to
hmm
pursue that, I guess.
I actually
And
like that
I don't
plot.
know.
No, yeah, keep going. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was going just circling back to like another plot point with, because I had like a bunch written down for plot point one, but one of them was the dinner with the brother, and like that could kind of connect back to like in the later scene when he does get kicked out like by his family, like that could kind of tie back to it because he was like talking with his brother and he was like, yeah, nah, you're gonna get kicked out of the family. So like him still pursuing afterwards is like kind of him knowing that like it will get him kicked out of the family, but like he's still sticking with it.
Mhm.
Like
It's a good
even though
point.
they do end up breaking up, but like to him he's like, oh, I know that this is gonna be like wrong to my family, but I'm gonna still continue with this.
Yeah, that's
That could
good.
like, yeah, those were kind of to me what plot point one kind of was. I don't know, I have a bunch written down, but like
Hmm
after like thinking about it, those two are kind of what stuck with me personally.
I really
I
like that. Oh, really, only because Kumail like he makes it irreversible almost. Because like the parents do try to like be like, "Hey, you don't have to stay here anymore," and then he comes back anyway. And then he makes that effort to like stay with Emily and to stay with the parents instead of going to like meet the girl that the mom set up for the arranged marriage. Like it goes back to Kamal wanting to stay, and that's what makes it like irreversible almost because he's putting himself in that position over and over again to be there.
hmm And if we had to target a direct moment, because I agree with both of what you're saying. I love Jen's hundreds of years of cultural norms weighing down on his shoulders because I think
It
that's it.
literally is.
I think that like that is it. But I also I think that what John is like John is closest to what in my mind would be like a plot point one. But if I had to like just talk about specifics, I'm gonna have to talk about Emily's parents because I think that plot point one is in the hospital when he meets Emily's parents for the first time, and this I think this is a little more subtle than like a lot of than some of the other ones. Like her going into the coma does trigger something. Her like they're breaking up does trigger something. Um, but I think that my favorite like something that like the movie triggers within itself that isn't as overt but yet as like irreversible as anything else is when he meets Emily's parents and decides like in himself that like he wants them to like him. He wants to act responsible and caring for Emily. And it isn't like not exactly for Emily's sake or his own sake with Emily, even though he does like try later on after Emily wakes up to kind of turn the story into like, oh, I was caring for Emily. But that's not really it. He was caring for Emily in like conjunction with Emily's parents. He was trying to form a relationship with them. And I think that that relationship with Emily's parents is the point of no return because that's when he starts to kind of replace his own parents and family with Emily's parents. And that's when he starts to like push them away to the point that like he's no longer going on the dates. He's no longer spending the same kind of time with them. He's no longer giving them the same kind of attention or conversation as a child because he's getting affirmation from somewhere else. So I would argue that him encountering Emily's parents and making the instant decision that he wants to look he wants them to appreciate him is what causes the point of no return.
Yeah. I think we do have to probably move on because we got
Okay.
Yeah,
time
of course.
ticking.
He's
But
watching the timer go.
I'm watching it go. But even talking about the parents, I'm gonna bring up the midpoint because I calculated the midpoint, and the midpoint of that is when it's flashing between him at the comedy show with the parents, between he's at the comedy show with the parents, and then it's flashing back to the house with his whole family and the girls there waiting, and they're like, "Is he gonna come? Is he gonna come?" And then everyone's like, "Oh my God, he is gonna come." That's a bad description of what that scene is.
I think you summed it up really well.
Yeah,
But
no.
that's the
Yeah, like I
midpoint.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the midpoint in the film time-wise. And then is that agreed?
I would agree
Myself.
personally. Like I feel like is like the just like the emblematic of the conflict. Like I feel like that kind of hits the nail on the head. Like it's him kind of breaking off from like his family a bit, not showing up for the like arranged date or whatever, and him committing to being with like Emily and like staying with her and her family and like trying to take care of her, and his parents being like, nah, like this is not good, like what's wrong with you, man? And like I don't know, it kind of shows him kind of moving away from his family a bit, even though they're kind of the ones putting the pressure on him to like be in an arranged marriage, but he's still like getting further from that and he's getting closer to Emily and her family.
Yeah.
May I know my timeline is a little backwards, but if the midpoint could start in Act 1, then I think that's a really good midpoint for my conflict. Because it shows like it's him actively being pulled between two lives. Like he has like his family is a big representation of his culture and where he comes from, obviously. And it's between him and the life that he's trying to cultivate in America. Again, looking back to like a normal American life, like doing like the whole stand-up comedy, and he's not being a lawyer like his family wanted, or a doctor technically like his family wanted. And like it's the active almost struggle between the 2 points because he's in the center of it while his brother's like calling him a bunch of times, trying to pull him back, or his family trying to like pull him back into the culture that he's grown up in his whole life, and he's trying to propel himself forward using Emily's parents as like a pull the other way. And so my whole conflict of centuries of cultural norms, it's really tying it together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I see what you're saying, and I'm fascinated by it. That you're identifying the midpoint as the point that is described as the one that is most emblematic of the central conflict, as occurring before plot point 1, which kind of, in a sense, defines the central conflict.
Okay, you know what? I think I'm right. I have no argument. You have no proof.
No, I
Besides
think that did I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but my hot take here, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that what Jen has identified as plot point 1, I'm gonna argue the case that it is plot point 2, in fact, when his parents kick him out of the family. Because I think that, as I said before, plot point 1, which is him encountering Emily's parents and deciding that, or not deciding yet, maybe unconsciously deciding that he wants them to like him. He wants to be a part of them in a way. Um, Plot point two, like in the midpoint, is like this emblematic scene of that like shift away from his family to this family, where like previous like patterns and like like schedules and events and family like circumstances are now altered due to his like leaving, like his presence is leaving the family and going somewhere
Mm.
else, like and it's like perfectly like described by the interplay between those two scenes. And then plot point two is like when the conflict, or at least like what we understand as a conflict, like takes like a dramatic shift and things aren't the same as they were before. Things are in like a surprising new area. And when I say surprising, I don't mean that like you wouldn't be able to see it coming or anything, because it is like I think that everyone is aware of the possibility that Kumail might be rejected by his family at some point. That's like what it's building up to. But I think even so, the
Mm.
moment when it hits does like recontextualize the rest of the movie. He's out of the family now, and it's just like setting up the remainder, a long remainder of the movie. I will admit, there is another 40 minutes in my vision between, or about 40 minutes, maybe 30, between my plot point two and the climax. But I
Mm.
still think that everything between like those 2 points, like pretty like even if it moves slowly, it's a pretty clear like spiral or drain down into the climax of this moment of, and we must talk about the climax, I guess, but moment of
Mhm.
reconciliation.
Okay. Can I know I feel like I've been taking up a lot of audio space today, but I just have a lot to say about this. And then I will let John and Abby go for their gambit. That was what you mentioned, the whole like it's not exactly surprising when plot point two happens. That was my one piece of ammo, not ammo, but like that was the one point where I could have, where like your plot point two kind of doesn't, because like I feel like we kind of saw it coming. And if not saw it coming, it was alluded to a lot of times. So it wasn't
Mhm.
like this outlandish possibility that he could
No, of
be
course not.
kicked out of the family. We knew that like they talked about the cousin that got kicked out like in the first 10-15 minutes. Like we knew that this wasn't
Yeah,
an
absolutely.
outlandish thing to happen. But you know what's outlandish? My
What?
plot point too. Let me enlighten you. Um my following the timeline right now, my act two I think was 20 minutes long. Um I said that my plot point too was when Emily rejects Kumail after the coma, when he goes to see her. And then she's like, yeah, you can't do this. I was asleep. This was not like, we're not together anymore. We weren't. I was asleep when you did like all your nice stuff. So we're broken up. And I don't want you back.
Hmm.
Because that, like, I feel like knowing that this was a rom-com going into it, you don't really see that coming. Like,
No.
she wakes up and like she's all grateful to see him. And then you get your fun little happy ending, and then that's it. But that's not what happened. And I think it's also real, like tying it back to the fake conflict that I created. Uh, she was a big driving force in him fighting against his culture almost, or like a big driving point of like why he couldn't, like that was a big like cultural no-no of him like dating a white woman and
Hmm.
not somebody of the same culture as he is. And so her rejecting him is turning that whole thing on its head, because this is kind of what started this whole, I'm gonna like I could leave the family and I'm trying to like not resist my culture but trying to like create my own in America.
Hmm.
And it had a lot to do with him dating this white woman who now doesn't want him. So like where do we go
Mm.
from here? It's a very big like turned on
Mm.
its head moment of like what would you do now if you were Kamal, who like left your family effectively for this woman or for like this idea of a person, and then she rejects you? Like where do you go from there? Because personally I'm taking a couple business days to
Yeah.
like figure that
Oh
out.
my God. Yeah. That's compelling, Jen. I
Thank
may
you.
need to think on that for a second. Abby, do you have any thoughts on plot point two?
First of
Yeah.
all, I'm gonna be so honest. My screen's glitching and there's two of each of you, and none of you are
Well,
moving. But as long as you guys can hear me, um, I have two arguments. I will agree with Jen, and then I have like two reasons for it. First of all, the time matches up. That's all I gotta say about that. Second of
thank
all,
you.
I do think it's one of those moments where it is flipped on its head, kind of adding on to what Jen said. You expect that in this movie, if he rejects his family, oh, at least he'll have a happy ending with Emily. Or like if he breaks up with Emily, at least he'll have his family. In this point, he rejects his family thinking he's gonna have Emily, and he goes to Emily, and Emily's like, nope. So then he's lost without his family and without Emily. So I think it's one of those moments you're like, oh shit, I really did see this coming. This isn't a rom-com exactly. Well, probably it is, but like
It
it's
is.
not expected, like
No.
Jen kind of said, and it is turned on its head. Yeah. Do you guys have
Uh,
anything about this?
I had like a different plot point too, like in my head, but like y'all have kind of convinced me. Like I had that one down, but I was like, all right, I don't think that's like the main like plot point too. Like I
Let's hear what
originally
you
thought
think.
it was gonna be, I thought it was gonna be.
Oh,
I'm sorry, John, you're cutting out for me right now.
you muted yourself, or like your
Something
computer's muted.
happened.
I can't
Yeah,
see.
I just like I have my notebook like lying right here, and I
Oh,
Oh,
just
and then it
hit
like
my
cut for
keyboard by
real.
accident. But
yeah, no worries.
yeah, what I was saying was I originally thought it was gonna be like him like officially getting kicked out by the family because like even though it was kind of like everybody saw it coming, it's like still like a major like it's like oh shit like the conflict was he could not date Emily because he was gonna get kicked out of his family, and he kind of just ripped off the band-aid and did it anyways. So now he like it's just like oh he's free to do what like he can date Emily, like he can go
Hmm.
do that, like he's
Mhm.
free to do what he wants. Um, but like as y'all were saying, what kind of flipped it on its head was him doing that and then getting rejected again by Emily, and he's just kind of like I don't know, he's not like in limbo, but he's just like oh now he has neither of the things that he wanted. Like
Right.
what's he gonna do? Like what's the conflict now? He just got rejected by everybody.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah. Then what would, okay, can we talk about then the climax or what we think that the climax might look like? Because if plot point two is, and I think I'm moderately convinced that plot point two could possibly probably be this rejection between Emily and
Hmm.
Kumail.
It
And if that's the
possibly kind
case,
of do.
I'd love to hear what you guys think the momentum is between plot point two and the climax. Like where does it go from there to there to there?
Hmm. Do we want to start with Abby, what the actual climax is? Because our
Yeah.
plot point two lines up mostly, right? The plot point two, like mine was the same as what it technically should be.
Yeah, let me look. Plot point three is wait, plot point three has no
No time.
timing.
Oh, might be.
No, I
Okay.
also was confused at what I was doing, but um I had plot point three down at the conversation of the theater, but that was an earlier when the conflict in my mind that when I wrote that down, the conflict was different than what I think it is now. So now I would say it's more when he leaves, like when he has that conversation with his parents, I think that's the moment. Um, but honestly, I could be convinced otherwise.
I love it.
I feel
I
the
love
same
doing
way.
that. Okay. My plot point three was when he like verbally commits to going to New York when A.D. Bryant and Bo Burnham ask I forget the names of their characters. Honk. When they
Sorry, that was coming from over
it's
here.
okay. I'm just like I'm a dog with like a squirrel, so uh because it's when they're like, hey, you should come to New York with us after you absolutely bombed your audition for like the Montreal Festival, and then he agrees to do it. I think that's very telling to like him committing to coming to his own and like committing to this lifestyle that he's created for himself with or without Emily, which at this point is now it kind of has to be without. Uh,
At this point.
yeah, at this
Mhm.
point because this is after plot point two occurs.
Yes.
Maybe
Three
10
after
minutes
two.
after, maybe 5 full minutes after plot point two happens. Um, like because plot point three or like the climax, that's all like the problems are resolving itself. This is
Hmm.
him like leaving the place that he that has been living in for a while, leaving where his family was, leaving where Emily was. It's him like putting himself back together almost, and he's ready to continue on without both of the things that he lost along the way.
But Jen,
Mhm.
one might say, but Jen, there's still this huge scene that follows the commitment to the decision of New York, where he is actually packed up and leaving for New York, and the resolution comes between him and his parents, where we are given this like we see this like moment of tenderness from his father and from his mother as well, who makes him food, and we see this resolution between them, this decision that even though things aren't the same and things might never be able to be the same, we're still willing to, even if they don't say it with words, they're still willing to be a family for him. And I think that that's
Mhm.
like the emotional climax, because after the climax of a movie comes the denouement, which is like the absence of conflict or the anti-conflict, or like when that which the characters desire is fulfilled, and then there's like this like lack of desire. And I think that that
Mhm.
scene, like the scene where like his dad and mom like drive down to give him food, is like fundamentally not that, because it's like it's a full exhibition of like the conflict between them and like discovering a resolution through this like emotionally charged moment of dedication and care through food. I would argue that the denouement is, and I think everyone here agrees, is like the like immediately following the, like everything after the climax is the denouement. And if it's the scene with his parents, then that would like neatly line up with the fact that it's sort of this like flash forward, or this like sneak preview of what Kumail's life looks like in New York. And then there's this like little reflection, or like a little like bookend between how Kumail and Emily first meet, with like the same lines and the New York thing. And it kind of looks like maybe they are actually getting back together for some reason. Which is like so
For some reason.
for some reason it's so denouement, because it's like it's the reversal, or like untethering of like the conflict of this movie with like the achievement of desire, like every
Mhm.
like, or at least I feel like it's in the sense that if you watch this movie as like primarily or solely a rom-com, then this would be like the undoing of the central conflict, or like the kind of reversal where like everything between Kumail and Emily is just kind of like not really a factor anymore. Like the past has been sort of like, or like, the conflict has sort of been like wiped in a sense. I don't know. Do any of you guys have any thoughts?
My
Uh,
only thought, oh, just to not to insert my opinion because I tend to do that all the time, like I did today. Um, is that I think the ending, the denouement, like I agree with where the placement is, and like you're completely 100% right in that. It's such like a, it's such a little cheat cop out that makes this movie like a rom com because like we get
Yeah.
to this point where it's so like about Kumail and his culture, like and about like all these other relationships that he has besides the one he had with Emily after like she does a whole rejection thing, and from that point forward it's very like family charged and very like Kumail forward, which like it's a movie about him, so like go figure. It like wraps it up back into a little like, remember this is a rom-com where she liked him and he liked her, like
Hmm.
look, like we're back where we started,
We're
even
back
though
where,
like
yeah.
we had that ending, but it's like they draw
mhm.
you back in. It's like, oh, all right,
Hmm.
do that then, be like that. And you know what it did, and I kind of, and it was cute. It was cute.
Yeah.
I
That
was gonna
yeah.
say, or sorry, like not to also insert my opinion, but I was just like, I don't know. I know I'm probably wrong, but the like I felt like there wasn't really denouement. I thought like plot point three like was them in New York, like kind of reconciling a bit. Because like even though
Interesting.
Yeah.
like I don't disagree with what you guys were saying. I didn't really have any strong feelings for any of them, but like I kind of felt like this might have been like the climax, because there wasn't like really a climax. Like there was nothing like high octane. Like you kind of like nothing jumped out at me as a climax exactly. But this is like
Mhm.
that's them like kind of going to New York, like or them like reconnecting in New York. Kind of to me, that's like what resolved the conflict. Because originally I thought the climax was when she was like got met up him in the theater,
Mm.
and they were like talking, and she was like, oh yeah, there's like a lot of things I liked, and he was like, oh well, I moved to New York. it felt like, oh well, now the conflict is still there because now she's like kind of she's kind of like having like her feelings kind of came back for Camille, I guess. Like I don't know how to describe it. She kind of like
Who
went up to him
does?
and then he was like, okay, I'm leaving, and then he dipped, and then it was just kind of like, oh well, now he's in New York and she's back in Chicago, and then when they reconnect, it kind of felt like, okay, now it's like finally settled, because
Mm,
even like she kind of came back and then he left,
yeah.
and then once New York had finally felt like they like had reached a meeting point, and like it wasn't anymore like like
Mhm.
I don't know, pulling away from each other, I guess.
You're absolutely right, John. That is what the movie is doing. Yeah. I think it is in that final like in that final stretch, even though I would still like 100% believe that the climax is him like saying goodbye to his dad and his
Mm-hmm.
mom through his dad. I think that's like 100% the climax of the movie and the central conflict's resolution. But you are right and really good in noticing that the movie, while doing that, is also attempting to kind of continue the threads of like the romantic relationship between him and Emily. Like there is like this push and pull where even after they break up and the conflict is like recontextualized for Kumail and he's like forced to reconcile with like being rejected on all fronts by like his family and his new family's fading away and all of that's happening. But then at the same time, there are scenes where like Emily's like looking at clips of Kumail's like stand-up routine, the one that he bombed at, and then you're watching her go like oh now I feel bad for him because he actually did go through this journey that he told me about, and it wasn't all about just it wasn't just about appearing good, but he also did care about me, and he was also like that kind of stuff is going on at the same time, and it is like it is the final scene in New York as denouement. Even though I still do think it is like the anti-conflict, and it is just kind of like inserted to bookends, and there isn't really much attachment to any of the central conflicts. Like it doesn't feel like a resolution to me. I do think that it was intended as like a sense of resolution because there is like this like push and play between Kumail and Emily that occurs in the third act that you notice.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Abby, where's the denouement?
Where's
What
the
do you think
denouement?
is the denouement?
Well, honestly, I see both. I was like fully committed to, oh, when not when he leaves, but when he starts in New York, like that being the denouement.
Hmm.
Um, but then John kind of half mostly convinced me that it doesn't exist. But I don't know if it can not exist. Like they can do anything they want, actually. Um, they can do anything they want, but then that kind of breaks the whole three act structure, which I think, anyways, is personally, I think it's half fitting for this film sometimes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, but it does make sense that the resolution would be, I don't know, I'm tied with where the resolution is. And
Hmm.
then if I could figure out where the resolution is, I could figure out where the denouement is. Um, but both have good arguments. I don't know
Yeah,
yet.
I'm definitely not like 100% on like what I said. That was just like a thought that I had.
It's a really
Like,
good
It's
observation.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
no,
it,
like
I
that was
Like that was just like we had to have one last curveball.
hmm.
that was a good one because I have no clue.
yeah, I
Do
was
we
because
feel?
like me personally, while we were
Mhm.
watching the movie, like I was just like, oh well, I don't like nothing. Like it doesn't feel like satisfying. Like even though he's like moving away, he's kind of like,
Yeah.
all right, this shit's happened. He's moving to New York. He's just kind of move on, like work, like focus on stand up comedy. But like even though that should have been like, oh yeah, or yeah, it still might have been like the climax. That's when he's like moving on, like it's resolved, it's kind of done. He's moving forward. It still
Mm.
felt like, oh well, but like what about Emily? Because the scene before was her kind of be like coming back, be like, hey, you know, I saw like your thing and like just wanted to talk to you and everything, and he was like, oh, well, I'm leaving. And it just kind of felt like to me like that having that like right before kind of made it feel like, oh well, nothing like it's still like even though he's moving on, it still hadn't felt like resolved to me
Yeah.
at least.
I can agree with that.
I
Do
would
we?
I would go, Jen.
No, you go.
Okay. I would argue that that dissatisfaction that you're noticing in his like move to New York is like a part of the emotional like resolution. Like there's supposed to be this sort of like a little bit like a trace amount of like emptiness because like his like this moment is where he's like kind of finding like or trying to like
Hmm.
reconstruct like a sense of identity after having like after this like explosive shift in like family dynamics. Like his parents are now no longer like the same figures in his life that they were before, and they never will be the same again. Like the rituals he has with them are now like gone. They are a thing of the past, and so is his relationship with them. And then the relationship that he formed to replace that dynamic with Emily's parents is also kind of like gone. And it's not like as like dramatic of a point as like his like loss of like his family, but it is like this kind of after Emily wakes up and like says like I guess so, like not even just says but like kind of reminds everyone that hey, I was asleep. Even if like you guys were like getting along well and had your own relationship going between you, you're not a part of my family. I was just like I was asleep, and the other day before I went into this coma, um, you were nowhere near my family, and you're not a part of it. And then he kind of like has to relinquish this new thing that he's made to replace this old thing. And he comes to this realization, or at least this understanding that like he has to forge his own way forward, his own like sense of identity outside of the reinforcement of like a parental dynamic. And that's why it's a bittersweet ending, and it's a little lonely, but I think it's really I think it is the moment that is primed with like the emotional weight of the entire movie beforehand because it's so concerned with his identity and with his almost like sense of isolation and everything that happens after in the flash forward to New York. It's even if you would argue that it is like an emotional crux of the movie, I don't think it's anywhere near being like the emotional crux of the movie because it's so like detached from every other plot point we've discussed so far. It's like so like on top.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I
I
get
was
what you're
taking it
saying.
in.
Yeah, it was,
Do we feel that that's where we can end this conversation? Does anybody have a outstanding point to give to that? Or are
I don't
we
think
no,
so.
not really.
okay? Because I have two questions for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah, go.
It's a hear me out character, or who would you vote for to be the president of the United States? Mine happens to be in the Venn diagram of that question, of those two questions, the middle ground. Terry, the dad.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all I got.
that's good.
I love
No,
Ray Romano. I'm good with that. He's
okay.
king.
I can, I don't know about President, but my hear me out character is also definitely Terry, despite the fact that I'm not particularly attracted to him. I do find him a very attractive man. Like he is a very, very attractive person. He's
Hmm.
fun to be around. I like when he yells that one time. Like it's very like sweet. It like you can tell that it's
Oh.
like out of character for him, but like
Hmm.
he's trying and then like he ramps up. Like I don't know. Like he's someone that I feel like I could connect with for
I just
sure.
thought he was funny. But like, no,
He's
I like
really
that.
funny, and you like that he has the New York accent, of course.
Don't even get me started on the New York accent. It was too much. It was too much. He said water, coffee, shut up. I sound the same way. Be quiet. There can only be one of us. All
All
right?
right,
It's either
Abby
your fake
John.
accent or my real one.
Me, Loki, I just want to sit down with Chris. He had such short little moments where I was like, I want to watch his show. Like when
Mm.
he stands up and talks, it's going to be so painful. It's going to be painful to watch, but I want to sit there and watch because I just want to hear that. I feel like he has things to say and they probably don't make sense ever. But
That's good. John.
Um, I don't know. I had not thought about it, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe just Emily. She's funny.
Love
Hmm.
it.
Like Yeah, she's just like silly, fun person to like talk to and just be around.
Yeah,
For
that's good.
president,
She had a little blue-haired liberal moment too, because she had like that undercut where it was like kind of green a little bit, and I saw that. I clocked her.
Blue hair and
Um,
pronouns.
Yeah, blue hair pronoun. Damn liberal.
John, who do you
But
want to vote for president?
um, this is a
If you
tough
have one, if you
question.
don't have
I
one.
feel,
yeah, it's
I
so
feel
okay
like
if you
I
don't.
don't know. I don't know if any of them would be a fitting president, but if I
No.
had to choose, it would probably be Terry. I don't know,
Yeah. Terry for
but
Dang.
like,
president.
if
I don't
it
think he'd
was
be
a
a good
choice
president.
between like
No, not at
Terry or
all.
like anybody else, then I probably would choose anybody else. But
Low-key Beth.
Beth, I think she would be a pretty good president. I don't think anybody else would vote for her.
Nobody would vote for her, but I feel
No.
like she'd
No,
be okay.
But the four of us could.
and that's enough.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. My name is Sandra Munoz.
My name is Jennifer Albano.
my name is John Juliuson.
And I'm Abigail Glynn.
That's
And
Francisco Goya.
Jason
You got
Momoa
David
is
Bowie.
outside. Yeah, David Bowie is over there with Labyrinth poster.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
And see you next week.
Yeah,
Or not.
or maybe not. I don't know. We watched The Big Sick. Bye.
Thanks, Sick. Bye bye.
Bye.